Defund the police? How about we defund the government schools and give those funds directly to families? Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. How we doing? Stephanie checking in with another episode of Class Disruption. And today, we're talking school reopening. But before we get into it, I just want to give a huge thank you to all your beautiful faces out there. We hit a big milestone, over 100 subscribers the other day. And I just want to thank all you guys for tuning in. This channel, it's really a space for me to explore my interests in education policy, a way for me to connect with and have conversations with other great educators out there. And I'm just so happy that it can provide other people value at the same time. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any suggestions for content that you want me to make, let me know in those comments down below. If you want to come on and have a conversation, hit me up. Let's do it. That is what it is all about. And you know what to do. Hit that like button. If you're new here, welcome. I love your beautiful face. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that bell so you get notified every time I drop a video. And you know what the most important thing to do is? Share this video, right? So we can spread the disruption all around the globe. And with that said, let's get into today's video. Checking out this video put out by Teaching Saves Lives. Emily, she's a national board certified English teacher from Michigan. And I've actually been following her for a while on Instagram. We've had some interactions in the comment sections. She let me know that she thinks that my content is problematic. She, has had problems for a while with the way that my account is being run. And I let her know I don't agree with everything or all her viewpoints that she expresses either, but I appreciate her perspective in pushing my own thinking. A couple weeks ago, she wrote a letter in response to an article in The Atlantic where it was a nurse and her husband is a teacher, and she was basically saying that, teachers, they need to suck it up and get back in there. I've been working throughout this whole time, and if you want to check out that entire article, it's a good read. I would suggest you do that. Link is in the description down below. But basically, Emily wrote a letter in response to that, refuting a lot of the points. 174 other teachers co-signed onto it, and in this video, I'm going to be giving my reaction. However, I want to preface this video, and I started to say some of these things as I was introducing the topic for today, but I want to preface this by saying that I totally understand and get and have experienced those fears and those anxieties surrounding this pandemic. And I especially understand those fears and anxieties in the context of being a teacher and teaching in buildings in places that are far away from corporate America and hidden. And I understand what it's like to work in a school, and I understand oftentimes that we are overlooked and under-resourced. So I get that. Back in March, when the virus first took hold in the United States, and nobody knew what was going on, I was really having a hard time coming to grips with what was happening. Like, what is this virus? How does it affect you? Should we shut down? And all around the country, schools are shutting down, and New York City hasn't said a word about it. And so I used my own sick day on Friday the 13th of March to call out, because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't feel like I was being protected by the school or anybody, and I just needed some time. I needed to wait and see. Fortunately, that by the end of that weekend, New York City had said we're shutting down schools. We're going to be going remote till at least through spring break. And just the whole emotional state just totally thrown upside down. Anybody who's been following me for a while, especially on social media, knows like I get up early. I'm 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and then by 8, 9 at night, I'm in bed. Well, I could not sleep, right? Staying up super late, having issues getting up in the morning. My son was dragging me out of bed like, mommy, get up. And I was just off. And then around June, mid-June, things just started to click back. I just started waking up earlier. I had the motivation to work out again, to, start eating good again. And I've been on the up and up since then. And I realized not everybody's like me. There's some people who weren't impacted at all by this pandemic. You know, they already working from home, no big deal. There's people who got out of their funk faster. There's people who got out of their funk slower. There's people who are still undoubtedly going through it. Nonetheless, it has been 4 or 5 months now since this thing has started, and without invalidating anybody's feelings or anybody's personal circumstances at this moment in time, we have many more data points available to us now that we didn't have back in March. We have data points both in the sense of like academic studies being run, government and non-governmental organizations collecting data, and then in terms of our own personal anecdotal data points. And I believe any meaningful conversation that we have about school reopening needs to consider all of this type of data. And it needs to have a good balance of that. I thought about not making this video because I don't want it to be seen as a personal attack. This is by no means a personal attack on Emily, on any of those teachers, or any of the other teachers who align with these viewpoints. But I decided to go through with it for 2 reasons. And the first reason is I'm currently reading a book about education reform. It's actually from the 1970s, and I'm going to be doing a video series coming out on that pretty soon too. Very interesting to see that we're still literally going through the same exact problems using the same language as back in the 1970s. But I digress. One of the main points it says in the opening of that book is that you have reformers and you have their critics, and both are necessary part of the recipe in order to have the outcome that we desire. And I so value this in my own life too. Like, I have ideas and I go to people, I'm like, tell me why this idea is wrong. Tell me why this idea sucks. Tell me how I can make this idea better. Working with a lot of my colleagues, I mean, they have massively different, especially political, but also just approaches in the classroom. But I'm constantly using them as a resource and saying, oh, I see what you did there, I like that, and I bring it into the mix. So I think that it is necessary for us to get pushback and feedback on what we're saying, number one. And number two, this is not only her own personal view. 174 other teachers also signed on to this, and it is a viewpoint that I am seeing expressed widely across social media by other teachers. And personally, I have friends and colleagues who are at very different places all across the spectrum on this debate, and we're able to have these conversations and still continue to be friends and value each other and their input. So in good faith and in recognition of the humanity of all my fellow educators, let's get into it. All right, so here's the video. The title is "This is How We Have Always Treated Our Nation's Teacher, a Teacher's Response to the Atlantic." Again, the account is Teaching Saves Lives. Remember that name, Teaching Saves Lives.
Is this how we treat our nation's teachers? I've heard this question asked so often over the past few weeks, usually by non-educators. As a teacher for the past 17 years, let me answer. Yes, it is. We ignore them, we judge them, we disparage them, and we disrespect them.
So only 20 seconds in and already it's just getting right in there, just hitting me, framing teachers as victims. And I mean, I've never seen myself as a victim. Growing up, my parents didn't let me have that attitude, and definitely not in my classroom I don't have that attitude, but that always has kind of been my dig with teachers, is they see themselves as victims of the system. Oh, if only I could do this, if only I could do that. And it's just kind of, we're like trained in this victim mode of thinking. And the thing is, when I tell people I'm a teacher, I get nothing but respect and reverence and congratulations and thanks for the work that I do. So I'm not really sure where this is coming from, unless we're looking at the context of all government workers. I think that there is somewhat of a valid argument to say that government work or blue collar work is seen in somewhat of a different light than the more like white collar professional work. I just don't see myself as a victim, and I think that this victim mentality is really toxic for teachers. And that's just been something from before this pandemic that has really been one of the things at Class Disruption that we're trying to disrupt the status quo on.
Here's a story about someone I respect. He's not a teacher. I have a former student who's a Marine. He signed up for the service knowing and being proud to serve his country.
Are we starting to see where this is going?
Serving his country as a member of the military is something that gives him enormous clarity and comfort. And when he signed up for this duty, he did so with the knowledge that he might die for this work. He and I still talk a lot. I worry about him because I'm a person with a huge heart, and this is a kid who changed my life. So, keeping in touch with him seems to be the least I...
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really trying, for this to not be a personal thing, but it's because I'm a person with a huge heart, right? So again, kind of just really playing on that, feel bad for me, or look how good of a person I am.
Kid who changed my life. So, keeping in touch with him seems to be the least I can do, especially during a global pandemic. But what always strikes me when we talk is the utter difference between his work and my work. My work is teaching. His work is serving the country. I respect his contribution, and he respects mine. But they are not comparable, and to try to do so diminishes his sacrifice, and it glorifies my profession to martyrdom. It's irresponsible to compare the sacrifice of a member of the military makes for his family, his safety, and his country to the work that a teacher with a master's in curriculum design makes for their students.
Okay, literally no one is making that comparison except for you. In the Atlantic article, the nurse talks about how her husband sees it as his duty to serve his country through teaching. And the nurse saw it as her duty to serve her country through doing her job as a nurse. But nobody is comparing what teachers do to people in the military. Sure, serve your country, one of our most common understandings of that is, I'm going into military service, but it is not the only understanding of serving your country. And in fact, serving your country is used in a lot of different ways, and including recognizing the service that educators do for their country. For example, my school is called Law and Community Service. So we have kids who come in wanting to go to be lawyers, who want to go into law enforcement, law. And then we have kids on the community service side who want to go into the military, who want to go into becoming public advocates or social work, and yes, teachers. Teaching is most definitely a way to serve your country. No, there's not generally the imminent threat of death like there might be in the military service, but as teachers, we are undoubtedly serving our community, just as nurses, just as grocery workers, just as firemen and policemen, and the people who work at the banks and the people who wash your cars. We all have an integral part of this mission of serving our country. And the thing is, I know that she knows this at least on some level. I mean, her handle is teaching saves lives. So I don't know if that has some other metaphorical meaning or it was born out of some other context, but as I see it, teaching saves lives is another way of saying teaching is a way to serve your country and your fellow humanity.
In response to Kristen McConnell's essay regarding teachers returning to work, there are so many aspects of it that are problematic. I found it difficult to narrow the focus to only a few, but
So problematic here, guys.
First, McConnell wrote about her husband, a public school teacher, who's adamant against a teacher strike because he, quote, understands on a deep and personal level his duty to serve his country in the classroom, close quote. Serving one's country is not done from a classroom. Serving one's country is not done from a makeshift desk in a 2-bedroom apartment in the Bronx while your own children nip at your heels and you attempt to take attendance over Zoom. Serving one's country is not done from the walls of a brick building where remote Zoom meetings are being projected out to your school community. This narrative that teachers need to be back in the classrooms to serve our country is dangerous as it is nationalist, and it's taking us down a path that we must reverse swiftly.
So we get more of this, teachers, their service is nothing compared to the military. She actually makes a pretty good case as to why teachers are not very essential for anything at all. But then we get to this, it's as dangerous as it is nationalist. And I'm kind of confused about that. First of all, since military service is desirable and something that we should revere, but I mean, military service is to protect our nation. Is that not nationalist? And then school districts are controlled locally, but do you want this to be solved on a national level? Like, you want the president to nationally make legislation over this, or would that be nationalist? So to me, that whole phraseology right there, it doesn't really actually mean anything. I mean, it sounds like, oh, they're nationalists, like it gets me heated, but it doesn't mean anything.
It's clear that McConnell does not know how we spent our summers, so as someone who is connected to nearly 10,000 teachers nationwide, I'll share some insights into what we've been up to for the past few months.
Yes, please do. Tell us again about how big your heart is.
Emailing our students every single day, making sure that they're safe and that they have enough food at their house. Building out Google Classroom sites that support our students in digital learning environments. Driving around to neighborhoods to check mask to mask in with students and asking simple questions like, how's your heart? And then receiving answers enough to break our own. Attending virtual, often unpaid trainings to get ourselves up to snuff for distance learning and digital instruction. Ordering materials for our classrooms out of pocket, knowing that we'll probably never see those rooms again this year, but just searching for a moment of normalcy. There are other things we did too. Experienced nightly panic attacks, attended distance funerals for students and colleagues, tallied deaths in our own communities, texted suicide hotline numbers at late hours. We opened our backyards for students to stop by and social distance visits, and we mailed books across counties to get kids a sense of comfort, reminding them that books are a safe place to explore scary ideas. The fact is, teachers have never been seen as serving our country, nor essential, until it became clear that in order for our economy to roll on, we needed to be in the classrooms.
Again, I just want to reinforce how popular of a sentiment it is that becoming a teacher is one of the best ways that you can serve your country. I just really don't get this babysitting thing. Like, is that what you do in your classroom? Is that what you do is babysitting? And it's just a snarky retort and really lacks a lot of self-awareness about how our society functions and really undercuts your own value, which, again, I'm confused about what she thinks about the work that she does. Does it save lives, or is it just some other non-essential thing? There is definitely a component of childcare that goes along with what we do, right? The kids come into us, their parents go to work, and if they're sick one day or if there's a snow day, that means that parent has to take off from work or figure out some other arrangement. And I get it on that, if there's a snow day or a storm, I shouldn't have to risk my life driving through the snow so I can get to school to be there to watch your kid. But we're not talking about one-off day or an emergency situation like it was back in March when we had no idea what was going on. This is the way that our society is structured. And sure, we could have a larger conversation about that structure. So yeah, like, what do you expect the kids to do all day if their parents are going off to work? And if their parent is not able to go to work and has to stay home with their kid, what is that going to do to the ability to pay those bills and to feed those kids? Most kids, especially if they're in elementary school and even into middle school, really need somebody to be sitting there, guiding them, helping them stay focused, re-explaining things, pointing out on the paper where they're supposed to be. And if that someone who has to be there can't then be at work, how do their bills get paid? How does food get on the table? And that ultimately comes back around to impact us. Yeah, it's for the economy, I guess you can say that, but it's for all of us, because none of us can have any of these nice things that we have unless we do the work. And again, your handle is Teaching Saves Lives. It's pretty clear you have an understanding of the essential nature of the work that we do.
Further, McConnell discusses how educators owe our school communities our service and how it is our, quote, obligation, close quote, to return to our classrooms, because we should have spent the summer preparing for a safe return rather than, quote, honing our return to school arguments, close quote.
Now, there's something that I can agree with. And now, obviously, this is a quote from the Atlantic article, and she's trying to use it as an example of what is incorrect. But I agree with him. And I've had, like I said, this sentiment about teaching and teachers before I got into the work myself. When I was growing up as a high school, I always felt that way, that instead of figuring out how we can do this, how we can make this awesome and fun, is always an excuse about why we can't do that. Or at a professional development, teachers ask 50 versions of the same question, trying to understand something that's been explained 3 times. And now personally, I am a fan of the asking questions techniques of things that I'm unsure of and uncertain about or have questionable opinion about. But it's like teachers take the method and they turn it into almost a parody of sorts. In part, I do blame the system because it's constantly coming on you with these checklists of things that are so superficial, and they prevent us, like gatekeepers, from doing the work that we really want to do. And it's almost this like learned helplessness of teachers.
I would press those who argue that we need to return to face-to-face instruction for the betterment of our students' social-emotional needs to sit down. Just sit. If you're arguing that, let's consider how often you worried about or wondered about social-emotional learning instruction prior to March of 2020. Perhaps you were even one of those loud parents who challenged SEL work in the classrooms, claiming that it was all part of our touchy-feely liberal agenda, and asking questions like, why aren't the kids learning the standards? Check yourself.
Okay, so obvious injecting of a political bias here. It seems like she's accusing the writer of the Atlantic article to be a conservative or a Republican, and us good liberals over here, we really understand the true value of things. And what's great is actually in this, she doesn't refute the argument at all, right? The argument being made is that for the emotional and mental well-being of our students, they need to be back in school. And she's saying, oh, that might be true, but you didn't think that before. So she too is actually saying that it probably is better for our kids to be in school, but because you didn't think that before and you're only now just realizing that, you can't make that argument. Which if she's trying to say like, oh, they're just using that argument now, they don't really believe in it, they're just saying that because they want the kids back in school, maybe I could understand the value of that, but overall, she's admitting that there is value in having kids in school for these types of activities that we're keeping from them because they're not going back to school.
Do you only now care about SEL because you actually realize that this is what is going to keep kids alive, rather than that constant memorization and drilling of historical dates?
See? It's going to keep kids alive. The social emotional stuff is going to keep kids alive.
Let's be honest. How important is SEL to you really? If kids go back to school and are in school buildings, are we even cognizant that much of the work we will do in these buildings is going to be about policing? Policing of bodies, policing of ideas, policing of values, policing of movements.
Defund the police? How about we defund the government schools and give those funds directly to families? Yes, we're going to need to enforce rules around mask wearing, but this whole idea of policing this and policing that and policing bodies, it really gives it this hyperbolic tone that it's like sometimes in life you have to follow rules, and sometimes rules need to be enforced. It's not in the enforcing of the rules itself that would be policing, it would be how it's done. And I've seen, and I'm going to share with you over the next couple of days, some teachers who have been teaching in person with these rules, figuring out how to enforce them and still see and show their own humanity and see the humanity in their students and maintain that. And if we can't find that balance between enforcing the rules and maintaining our humanity, then maybe we don't deserve to be in the classroom and be educators.
It will not be high-quality skills-based instruction or intentional SEL curriculum. It will be placing children into seats and having them managed by a terrified adult for 8 hours. Let's talk too about what we, quote, signed up for, and how that might be similar or different to what those in the nursing or medical field signed up for. McConnell writes that she's not a biocontainment employee, so she was nervous about COVID in the early stages of her experience.
She was nervous, but she did it. And as a nurse working in a hospital with COVID patients, you're working with the most severe cases, right? Because we know 80% of the people who get this thing either don't know they have it or don't have a case that's severe enough to warrant going to the hospital. So if you're in the hospital and you're working with those are the people who have it the worst and who most likely have these high viral loads. And viral loads matter, which I'm going to go into much more detail in my video that's coming out in a few days. So whereas this nurse is working with the most severe cases, the highest viral loads, in schools, if we're going to be, first of all, having social distancing, we don't need to like get up into somebody's face and check out, put a tube down it or something. Now, not to say kids are going to be perfect at following social distancing rules, but we are going to have social distancing in place, mask wearing in place, all these things that mitigate the potential for getting the virus. And then on top of that, we're going to be, even if somebody does have the disease or does have the virus, it's unlikely that you're going to be inoculated under these mitigating circumstances with a high viral load.
Let me tell you what I'm nervous about. I'm nervous about school shootings. I've been nervous about school shootings every day for the past 17 years of my life.
I was wondering when we were going to get to the school shootings. Here we go.
I've been nervous about school shootings every day for the past 17 years of my life.
Every day? Every day you worry about a school shooting? I hate to think what else you're worrying about. I mean, if you're worrying about school shooting, then you must also be worried about your commute. You must also obsess about not dying in a fire and about not getting struck by lightning. According to The Atlantic, since the Columbine shooting, there have only been 10 mass shootings in schools that have taken place. As the article says, even one death is too many, but for perspective, 729 children commit suicide with a firearm in 2017, and 863 were victims of homicides by gun that year. And to really get a visual of what that looks like, they put this chart out. So I'm going to let her go on, but as she does, keep these facts in mind to keep greater context. I'm not really sure what the purpose of this hyperbole is, but I really think that these types of overstatements and just meant to really get your emotions oh my goodness, a school shooting, it's awful. I don't want to understate how horrible and disgusting that is, and I could never imagine that. But she's going to say this whole idea that teachers fear for it every single day, or many teachers have to walk into these buildings. They're talking about 10 mass shootings at schools. There's not really many teachers out of all of us going back to these schools. So again, just keep that in mind. We're going to let her keep going.
Including in the summer, as I prepare my classroom to defend against an intruder by hiding a baseball bat in the closet and putting a box of rocks by the door. Every single day we worry about a student or a stranger bringing a gun to school and killing people in our building.
I just want to say for the record, I've literally never had that fear, not ever.
Many of us kiss our partners goodbye in the morning with the nagging worry in the back of our heads, wondering, is this the last time I'll walk out of this door? That is real. Attempting to
It's real in your emotional state, but it's not real in factual terms, right? It's your truth. It is not the truth.
Bolster teachers by claiming that we're smart and adaptable and assuring us that we will not fail is petty and egregious.
Petty and egregious? The only petty and egregious thing that I see here is somebody giving teachers a compliment about how we're adaptable, we're able to adjust to different situations, we're able to use our talent as educators to save lives. The nurse is trying to recognize the hard work that we do, all the years of education that we put in to get to this point. No doubt that she's seen her husband put in, and she's giving us a compliment. It's like when a guy gives a compliment to a girl and she accuses him of being sexist. It's like, bro, take a compliment and move on.
It's disrespectful and harmful, and it continues the narrative that so many have believed about educators for so long. That it's our duty to kill ourselves for this work, either emotionally or now physically. This is psyops of the deepest variety, and it's occurred for decades in our nation.
Psyops? Oh man, I'm really trying not to get personal, but I can't get over the irony or her disconnect between the fact that her handle, her screen name, what she calls herself on social media is teaching saves lives. And yet every aspect of her argument, she seems to be turning around and just undercutting the value of the work that we do.
Many of our own families believe this, and some of us do. I don't want to die at school, but I accepted years ago that this might be my lot in life. Read a DM in my social media account earlier last week. I deleted it without responding, as well as the subsequent 13 other messages of the same variety. McConnell states that teachers are smart and adaptable. Yes, we are. We are also teachers. We are not medical professionals, and we do not have training for dealing with thousands of factors that come into our building and our classrooms every day. We do not have the adaptability to teach well and safely to terrified children. We cannot continue the superhero trope that is trotted out every time we experience trouble in our educational system.
Again, superhero trope? You call yourself teaching saves lives. Do you not get that?
Teachers are not superheroes. We are humans. We have families and fears, and we do not have the skills or trainings to keep 32 kindergartners from touching or hugging one another. And asking us to develop those skills in a matter of weeks is unacceptable, and it's criminal. But this...
No, you know what's unacceptable and criminal is the number of kids who graduate or who go up to the next grade not being able to read, not being able to write, not being able to do basic literacy and math. That is criminal.
This is what always happens to teachers. It's a constant of our narratives.
Yes, we're just victims constantly.
There's an emergency. Here, you figure it out. And 99.9% of the time, we do figure it out. Many of us work in schools where a school shooting has already occurred at some point in the history of the building. And yet we go back into those buildings to keep teaching kids. We are returning to areas where death and massacre occurred, and we are adapting to make it work.
See, it's the use of this boilerplate terminology. Many of us are going back into schools where we saw kids slaughtered. Like, no, in reality, many of us are not going back. There's a few for sure, but that's not the rule. That is the absolute exception.
So let that sink in for a minute. We are adapting our work to educate students in buildings where their classmates were slaughtered. Now we ask teachers again to return to buildings where more people will die. And we will be forced to again answer questions like, am I the reason my teacher died? We will be in situations where children cannot play with their friends anymore because their friends are dead. We will adapt like we always do, and we will make it palatable so that we can continue and continue and continue this hero trope. And we can continue to drink the Kool-Aid fed to us that this is what teachers do to serve their country. We're so tired. We can't do this anymore. And the very fact that we are being asked to speaks volumes. We are not a stimulus package. We are humans and we are professionals.
Exactly. We are professionals. We are paid to do the job of educating the students who enter into our classroom. And part of that contract means we are in a building physically with those children for 6 or 7 hours a day doing the particular content or curriculum that the state has given us to do. In an emergency, like a snow day or a hurricane, I understand the babysitter argument. But in the new normal, that argument does not apply. This isn't a one-off day, and this isn't the beginning of the outbreak when nobody knew what was going on. We've had time, and we have to figure this out. Not by ourselves, not just one teacher in a classroom saving lives, but in concert with the community, in concert with all the state and with the union, with everybody who has a stake in the outcome of this. And the reality is, the longer this goes on, even if government is paying people to hold them over and help us get through this, it is just increasing inequities everywhere. The rich are getting richer, their investments are still working for them, right? Their companies are still making money, Amazon's making billions, they're able to work from home, while people who have to be out in the community aren't working. And the government is paying them, but we're just creating more debt. And guess who's gonna have to pay that debt back? Our kids. All right, we're almost at the end, let's finish this up.
We cannot do this anymore. But most of us will. So we'll return, and we'll do this because we need the financial support of our jobs. We need health insurance, and we love our work. We do this because we love what we do. Walking away will be a faster death sentence than trying to stay and make it work.
Walking away would be a faster death sentence? Like, I don't understand this whole victim mentality. I have to stay because I need to pay my bills, but I'm gonna stay and it's gonna be horrible. But if I quit, not only can I not pay my bills, but I just won't be fulfilled in my life. It's just, nothing's good enough. Any way you spin it, teachers are the victims in this narrative. That's just not how I see myself. Not to mention that the picture painted here just doesn't match the reality of what's actually happening. The only mass deaths that had happened was when Cuomo sent people back to nursing homes, right? If you want to talk about mass deaths, it was in the nursing homes. That's where I think it was 40 to 50% of all the deaths were in nursing homes. And now, yes, rates are spiking, but the death rate has come way down. Like I said, I'm gonna do a video where I go through the research, like the actual research, like actual reports put out by scientists, since we want to talk so much about science, and not just headlines, not just tweets, not, Instagram posts. And not saying that those things don't have their place or don't at least get to an aspect of truth, but it's not the full story. We need to look at the data. We need to look at other places who have opened back up, who have gotten their kids back in school, and really see if it's this death sentence that some people are claiming to be, or whether it's just one of those regular kind of calculated risks that we need to take to live our everyday life. So let me know in those comments down below, what did you think about this Teaching Saves Lives video? What do you think about my reaction to it? What is just your overall opinion on the going back to school debate? Are you ready to go? Are you nervous? Are you not going? Where do you stand? Let us know in those comments down below. Of course, I need you to hit that like button. If you're new here, I love your beautiful face. Subscribe, hit that bell so you can get more of this beautiful face delivered to your inbox every time I drop a video. And of course, I need you to share this video so we can spread this disruption all around the world. And I'm gonna ask you, if you have $1 or $2, you can support the work that I do in the classroom with my students. You can do that through PayPal or through Cash App. Links to those are in the description down below. And like I said, 100% of those funds go directly to support the work that my students do. You can check us out on Instagram at Making History with Miss Edmonds. And I recently just put together a website, MakingHistoryInc.org. So check us out there. You know what I need you to do? Stay foolish, y'all.